From the Presidential Palace, Manila, Dateline Malacañang.
Good day, I am Win Peñano bringing you today's edition of Dateline Malacañang. Here are top Malacañang stories. President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. has left for Japan for a 4-day state visit aimed at strengthening economic, defense, and strategic cooperation between Manila and Tokyo. The presidential plane carrying the chief executive departed Villamor Air Base in Pasay City at around 1:36 Tuesday afternoon. In his departure statement, President Marcos described the visit as timely, saying the Philippines and Japan continue to deepen their partnership amid evolving regional and global challenges.
It forms part of a broader foreign policy agenda to forge closer political ties, stronger defense and security cooperation, and more enduring economic partnerships with major countries in the region in order to advance the interests of the Filipino people while promoting regional peace, stability, and prosperity.
The president noted that this is his first state visit to Japan following his official and working trips to Tokyo and Osaka in 2023 and 2025. He also emphasized Japan's role as one of the Philippines' most dependable partners, especially during periods of uncertainty.
This visit seeks to further strengthen the bonds of friendship with a close neighbor, like-minded, and future-oriented just like us in many ways, and the most reliable partner in times of both prosperity and times of uncertainty, such as today's ongoing oil crisis.
The visit coincides with this year's commemoration of the normalization of diplomatic relations between the Philippines and Japan, which began in 1956. During the trip, President Marcos is scheduled to meet Japanese Prime Minister Sanae Takaichi to discuss economic collaboration, defense and security cooperation, and regional peace initiatives. The two leaders are also expected to witness the signing of several agreements involving trade, investment, maritime cooperation, and security initiatives. President Marcos said the Philippines aims to further expand cooperation with Japan in key sectors including agriculture, energy, infrastructure, decarbonization, space technology, defense, and Mindanao development.
I believe we can further expand our security, economic, and development cooperation in order to enhance our national defense posture and to uplift the standard of living of Filipinos in different parts of the country.
And added that Japan continues to play a major role in supporting infrastructure projects under the government's Build Better More program, particularly in railways, highways, and transportation modernization. The president also highlighted the enduring relationship between the Filipino and Japanese people.
Indeed, the ties that bind the Philippines and Japan have become ever stronger over the decades, guided by the transformative spirit within the Filipino and Japanese peoples, and driven by the common desire for development persistently pursued by our forebears.
And said his administration is committed to elevating the Philippines' strengthened strategic partnership with Japan. During the visit, the President and First Lady Lisa Araneta Marcos are expected to receive state honors and participate in diplomatic engagements aimed at strengthening bilateral ties. The President will likewise meet with Japanese business leaders to promote trade and investment opportunities in the Philippines and hold talks with members of the Filipino community in Japan to recognize their contributions abroad.
Dateline Malacañang.
Meanwhile, President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. has reaffirmed the Philippine government's commitment to protect the rights and welfare of overseas Filipino workers in Japan, recognizing their important role in strengthening ties between the two nations. Speaking before members of the Filipino community in Tokyo on Tuesday night, President Marcos praised Filipinos in Japan for serving as the face of the Philippines through their resilience, hard work, and dedication. The president acknowledged the contributions of Filipinos employed in factories, schools, offices, hotels, hospitals, restaurants, and construction sites, saying they continue to deepen people-to-people connections between the Philippines and Japan.
Bago pa man kami makikipagpulong sa mga pinuno ng Japan, minarapat naming unahin ang pagkikipagkita sa inyo, sapagkat kayo ang dahilan kung bakit mahalaga ang relasyon ng Pilipinas at Japan.
President Marcos assured overseas Filipinos that the government remains committed to safeguarding their rights, welfare, and safety while they work abroad.
Kayo ang nagbibigay buhay sa ugnayang ito sa gitna nga ng Pilipinas at ng Japan. Napakahalaga para sa amin na ipabatid sa inyo na ang inyong pamahalaan ay walang tigil at walang sawang nagsisikap upang mapangalagaan ang inyong mga karapatan, kapakanan at kaligtasan habang kayo ay naghahanap buhay sa ibayong dagat.
The President said his 4-day state visit to Japan aims to strengthen cooperation in labor protection, trade and commerce, defense, and regional partnerships. He also highlighted the significance of the 70th anniversary of diplomatic relations between Manila and Tokyo, describing it as a milestone in the long-standing partnership of the two countries. President Marcos also addressed the impact of global developments, including rising oil prices linked to the ongoing Middle East conflict. He cited government measures such as the declaration of a state of national energy emergency and the rollout of the Unified Package for Livelihood Industry, Food and Transport or UPLIFT program.
Pinatunayan din ng krisis na hindi maibubukod ang Pilipinas sa epekto ng pagkakaantala ng supply ng langis. At walang bansang kayang lutasin ang krisis ng enerhiya ngayon na nag-iisa.
The President emphasized that despite global challenges, cooperation between the Philippines and Japan remains strong.
Bagamat pareho nating pinagdadaanan ng hamon na dala ng kakulangan ng supply ng enerhiya, hindi napatid ang pagtutulungan ng ating dalawang bansa upang maibsan ang hirap na naramdaman ng taong bayan.
President Marcos also paid tribute to longtime Filipino residents in Japan for helping pave the way for younger generations and strengthening communities across the country. According to the President, around 350,000 Filipinos now live and work in Japan, making them one of the country's largest expatriate groups. He encouraged Filipinos to continue excelling in their chosen professions while remaining proud of their heritage.
It is my fervent hope that you succeed in all your endeavors in your chosen careers, whether it be business, the arts, professional arena, the service sector, or in sports. I urge you to make a good account of yourselves and be proud of your heritage as Filipinos.
The President also reminded young Filipinos in Japan to embrace integration while preserving their Filipino identity and values.
However, integration does not mean assimilation. It does not mean forgetting your roots and abandoning who you truly are. Our greatest asset is our unique identity.
President Marcos said Filipinos should continue showcasing the best of Filipino culture and character while respecting Japanese laws, traditions, and customs.
Dateline Malacañang.
In our news, President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. has dismissed claims made by Senator Amy Marcos regarding an alleged no-election scenario in 2028. The president appeared surprised when asked about accusations that there were efforts to suspend the next national elections and extend his term in office. President Marcos was preparing to board the presidential plane for his 4-day state visit to Japan when reporters raised the issue. After hearing the allegation, the president responded with disbelief.
Hi, sir. Sir, statement on the no L. Your sister said that you wanted a no election scenario.
I wanted a no election.
Allegedly, sir.
The president did not elaborate further and instead smiled before proceeding to the aircraft. First Lady Lisa Araneta Marcos, who was beside the president at the time, also laughed off the allegation. Meanwhile, Palace Press Officer Claire Castro dismissed the claim as a diversionary tactic and emphasized that President Marcos follows the law. Castro said existing laws clearly provide for the conduct of the next national elections in 2028 and assured the public that the president would adhere to legal and constitutional processes. She also said Senator Amy Marcos should be asked directly regarding the basis of her statement. Earlier this month, Malacañang confirmed that President Marcos and his eldest sister have not been in contact for several years, although the palace said the president harbors no ill feelings toward her.
Dateline Malacañang.
Malacañang has expressed optimism that political tensions and the recent leadership change in the Senate will not affect the passage of priority measures being pushed by the Marcos administration. In an interview Tuesday, Palace Press Officer Claire Castro said President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. respects the principle of separation of powers and will not interfere in Senate affairs. Castro stressed that regardless of who leads the Senate, the president remains ready to cooperate with the legislative branch in pursuing measures that would benefit the public. She expressed hope that senators would remain focused on legislation rather than political disputes and internal conflicts. The palace official said priority bills being pushed by the administration are intended for the welfare of the Filipino people and should not be delayed because of political tensions. Castro also urged lawmakers not to allow partisan issues or personal interests to distract them from their mandate. She called on senators to resolve their own internal concerns while continuing to prioritize measures that address public needs. The palace maintained that the administration remains committed to working with Congress in advancing programs and reforms for the country.
Dateline Malacañang.
Executive Secretary Ralph Recto has denounced as politically motivated the plunder and malversation complaint filed against him over the transfer of reserve funds from state-run firms to the National Treasury. Speaking to reporters in Pasay City on Tuesday, Recto described the complaint as a harassment and nuisance case. The complaint filed by Dr. Tony Liachon questioned the transfer of 60 billion pesos from the Philippine Health Insurance Corporation or PhilHealth and 107 billion pesos from the Philippine Deposit Insurance Corporation or PDIC to government coffers. Liachon alleged that the transfer violated the Constitution and compromised public funds intended for health services and other programs. Recto, however, maintained that the transfer was authorized under the 2024 General Appropriations Act and stressed that the Department of Finance merely implemented what was provided by law. The former finance chief said consultations were conducted with government agencies and oversight bodies before the transfer was carried out. He also emphasized that he acted in good faith and denied allegations that he personally benefited from the funds. Recto added that the 60 billion peso amount transferred from PhilHealth has already been returned to the agency. Meanwhile, several House leaders came to Recto's defense, accusing Liachon to politicizing the issue and misleading the public about the nature of reserve funds. Deputy Speaker Janet Garin said the fund transfer mechanism was authorized by Congress itself, while Assistant Majority Leader Zia Alonto Adyong questioned what he described as efforts to create political controversy. House Committee on Higher and Technical Education Chair Jude Asidre also argued that reserve funds are not automatically intended for spending and accused critics of distorting the government's fiscal management process. Other lawmakers likewise rejected claims of wrongdoing and maintained that the transfer was carried out in accordance with existing law.
Dateline Malacañang.
Malacañang has assured the public of the government's readiness to mitigate the possible effects of El Niño, which may develop as early as June and continue until early 2027. President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. convened concerned government agencies at Malacañang Palace on Monday to assess the situation and identify interventions to cushion the impact of the weather phenomenon. Speaking in a chance interview in Pasay City on Tuesday, Executive Secretary Ralph Recto said preparations are already underway to reduce the effects of El Niño on vulnerable sectors. Recto said the government is reviewing past interventions to determine which measures were most effective during previous El Niño episodes. He added that authorities are already planning mitigation measures aimed at minimizing the impact of on communities, agriculture, and other affected sectors. Pag-asa earlier warned of a 79% chance that El Niño could emerge during the June to August season. The Weather Bureau also said drier than normal conditions may affect areas vulnerable to dry spells and drought. The last El Niño episode, which lasted from July 2023 to June 2024, significantly affected the country's agriculture sector. Meanwhile, Recto said the country's economic growth is expected to improve in the second and third quarters of 2026 despite earlier challenges. He cited delays in government spending on flood control projects and tensions in the Middle East that triggered higher oil prices as among the factors that affected first quarter growth. Despite these pressures, Recto maintained that the country's economic outlook remains positive. He also noted that government assistance programs have benefited nearly 2 million Filipinos affected by rising fuel prices and global economic conditions. The executive secretary added that the government's response to the Middle East crisis and oil price increases has helped ease the impact on the public.
Dateline Malacañang.
Malacañang says authorities are moving at the proper pace in implementing the International Criminal Court arrest warrant against Senator Ronald De La Rosa over crimes against humanity charges linked to the government's anti-drug campaign. In an interview Tuesday, Palace Press Officer Claire Castro said law enforcement agencies continue to carry out operations related to the arrest order. Castro confirmed that there is already a directive to enforce the warrant, but noted that operational matters are being handled by Justice Secretary Frederick Vida and concerned law enforcement agencies. She said arresting individuals who are allegedly in hiding and being aided by supporters is not an easy task, adding that authorities remain focused on carrying out their duties. The Philippine National Police has earlier mobilized tracker teams to locate and arrest De La Rosa after the Supreme Court denied his petition for a temporary restraining order. The senator has been listed by the International Criminal Court as a defendant and a person at large in connection with alleged crimes against humanity tied to the drug war deaths during the Duterte administration. De La Rosa served as Philippine National Police Chief from 2016 to 2019 at the height of the anti-illegal drug campaign. He had reportedly been under Senate protective custody before leaving the Senate premises on May 14 amid possible arrest efforts. Meanwhile, Castro echoed earlier statements from the National Bureau of Investigation describing De La Rosa as potentially armed and dangerous, citing concerns that individuals facing arrest may react unpredictably. The palace officials said authorities are taking necessary precautions while continuing efforts to enforce the arrest warrant.
Dateline Malacañang.
In related news, Justice Secretary Frederick Vida has called on Senator Ronald Bato de la Rosa's lawyer, Attorney Jimmy Bondoc, to surrender his client following the Supreme Court's denial of the senator's plea for a temporary restraining order. Vida said he has directed the issuance of a formal letter requesting Bondoc to provide the Department of Justice with any information that could help locate the senator or lead authorities to his whereabouts. He said the request is intended to encourage cooperation with legal processes and assist law enforcement agencies in the enforcement of the International Criminal Court arrest warrant. The Justice Secretary described the move as an opportunity for the Senator's counsel to support the proper service of the warrant. Bondoc earlier said he would turn over his client if the ICC warrant is recognized and cleared under Philippine judicial procedures. The International Criminal Court issued the arrest warrant for Senator De La Rosa in November 2025 in connection with alleged crimes against humanity tied to the anti-drug campaign during the administration of former President Rodrigo Duterte. Authorities continue to track the senator following the Supreme Court's ruling denying his request for a temporary restraining order.
Dateline Malacañang.
Meanwhile, the Philippine National Police or PNP Firearms and Explosives Office or FEO says it will recommend the revocation and cancellation of Senator Ronald De La Rosa's firearms licenses amid the case he is facing before the International Criminal Court. In a press briefing Tuesday, FEO Legal Officer Lieutenant Colonel Domer Tadeo said the office had already initiated a motu proprio review even before a similar request was filed by the National Bureau of Investigation. Tadeo said the FEO board is recommending cancellation of the senator's firearms licenses under Section 4G of Republic Act 10591, citing a pending criminal case with a penalty of more than 2 years. Republic Act 10591 or the Comprehensive Firearms and Ammunition Regulation Act governs the ownership and regulation of firearms in the country. The FEO chief is expected to issue the formal recommendation within the week, after which a notice will be served to Senator De La Rosa. Authorities said the senator will be informed of the cancellation and may file a motion for reconsideration as well as surrender any registered firearms. The FEO declined to disclose the number of firearms registered under De La Rosa, citing the Data Privacy Act. The move comes as the International Criminal Court has issued an arrest warrant against the senator in connection with alleged crimes against humanity tied to the government's anti-drug campaign. De La Rosa previously served as Philippine National Police Chief during the administration of former President Rodrigo Duterte.
Dateline Malacañang.
Government prosecutors are now seeking an accounting of firearms owned by the Senate as part of the ongoing investigation into last week's shooting incident at the chamber. Justice Secretary Frederick Vita said a special panel of prosecutors has issued a subpoena to the Office of the Senate Secretary requiring the submission of documents relevant to the fact-finding probe. This include the oath of office of Senate Sergeant-at-Arms retired General Mau Aplaska, as well as an inventory of firearms owned by the Senate and the corresponding issuance records to officials and employees. The Department of Justice or DOJ also requested access to Senate's security logs, including entry and exit records of personnel within the premises. Vida said investigators are also seeking records related to the specific firearm seen in video footage of the May 13 incident, including a CZ Scorpion assault pistol allegedly used by especially the Senate security personnel. The DOJ likewise issued a subpoena to the Commission on Audit for documents on Senate asset inventories, particularly firearms. Officials said some individuals may face liability for obstruction of justice if they are found to have concealed or tampered with evidence or delayed legal processes. The Justice Secretary warned that public officials found guilty of such acts may face perpetual disqualification from public office. The Criminal Investigation and Detection Group earlier said criminal complaints may be filed against Senate security officials involved in the incident. Authorities are continuing their investigation into the circumstances surrounding the shooting as the fact-finding process progresses.
Dateline Malacañang.
In our news, the Department of Social Welfare and Development, or DSWD, has extended initial humanitarian assistance worth 464,000 pesos to survivors and relatives of those affected by the collapsed building in Barangay Balibago, Angeles City, Pampanga. DSWD Field Office 3 said the aid covers both the injured survivors and the families of those who died in the incident. In a televised interview on Tuesday, DSWD spokesperson Assistant Secretary Irene Dumlao said the agency is acting in line with President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr.'s directive to ensure immediate assistance for affected communities. She said DSWD Secretary Rex Gatchalian ordered the immediate profiling of affected individuals so that financial and other forms of assistance can be provided without delay. For families of the deceased, the agency said burial assistance will also be extended. Initial support provided by the field office includes family food packs, non-food items, ready-to-eat meals, financial assistance, and psychosocial interventions. The DSWD emphasized that many of the affected individuals lost their jobs and sources of income, making immediate support critical. Transportation assistance was also provided to 9 individuals who chose to return to the Bicol region. The agency said additional livelihood assistance under its Sustainable Livelihood Program will be extended once they return to their home provinces. The DSWD continues to coordinate with the Angeles City local government and other agencies to ensure continued support for all affected families.
Dateline Malacañang.
The Department of Labor and Employment, or DOLE, has ordered a 1-month preventive suspension of its Regional Office 3 Director in Central Luzon following the collapse of a 9-story building in Angeles City, Pampanga that killed 4 people. DOLE Acting Secretary Francis Tolentino said in an interview on Tuesday that Region 3 Director Geraldine Panlilio will be suspended pending an investigation into the incident. Tolentino said the move comes amid questions on why a stoppage order linked to the construction site was reportedly lifted prior to the collapse. He added that Assistant Regional Director Alejandro Inza Cruz has been designated to take over the regional office while the investigation is ongoing. The labor chief, who formally assumed his post on Tuesday following his appointment by President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr., said the government is committed to holding accountable those responsible for lapses in workplace safety. Tolentino also outlined planned reforms in the Department of Labor and Employment, including the creation of a labor attorney's office to provide free legal assistance to workers who cannot afford representation. He said the department also plans to establish a 24-hour hotline for gig and platform workers facing wage and labor concerns. The DOLE chief added that he intends to strengthen coordination with both labor groups and employers through regular consultations. Tolentino replaced former Labor Secretary Benvenido Laguesma, who stepped down earlier this week due to health reasons.
Dateline Malacañang.
President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. has called on Filipinos to uphold unity, compassion, and altruism as the Muslim community in the Philippines and around the world observes Eid al-Adha. In his message, President Marcos joined Muslims in commemorating the Feast of Sacrifice, highlighting the story of Prophet Ibrahim as a reminder of unwavering faith, humility, and complete trust in Allah's will. He said the observance underscores that true fulfillment is found in obedience, devotion, and service to a higher purpose. The president added that Eid al-Adha carries a universal message that transcends faith, noting that sacrifices made with sincerity and love can strengthen families, communities, and shared humanity. He emphasized that selflessness helps heal divisions and build a more just society. President Marcos also encouraged Filipinos to carry the spirit of Eid al-Adha into their daily lives through acts of generosity and solidarity as part of building a more compassionate and inclusive bagong Pilipinas.
Dateline Malacañang.
The Department of Labor and Employment or DOLE has reminded private sector employers to observe proper holiday pay rules for Wednesday's regular holiday in commemoration of Eid al-Adha or the Feast of Sacrifice. In a Labor Advisory Number 09 series of 2026, the Department of Labor and Employment said workers who report for duty on the holiday are entitled to 200% of their daily wage for the first 8 hours. The department added that employees who work beyond 8 hours must receive additional pay based on overtime rates on a holiday. For those working on their rest day that also falls on the holiday, DOLE said they are entitled to higher compensation, including premium pay and overtime pay for extended work hours. Workers who do not report for duty, meanwhile, will still receive 100% of their daily wage provided they meet eligibility conditions such as working or being on paid leave on the day immediately preceding the holiday. The palace earlier issued Proclamation 1264 declaring May 27 as a regular holiday in observance of Eid al-Adha. Eid al-Adha is one of the 2 major Islamic feasts, which commemorates Prophet Abraham's willingness to sacrifice his son in obedience to God's command, symbolizing faith and devotion. The celebration also marks the conclusion of the annual Hajj pilgrimage to Mecca, one of Islam's 5 pillars.
Dateline Malacañang.
Overseas Filipino workers and their families will be given free access to selected heritage sites in Intramuros as part of a cultural homecoming initiative ahead of Migrant Workers Month in June. The Department of Migrant Workers or DMW said the program titled Pasyal Pamilya Balik Bayani sa Walled City is being held in partnership with the Department of Tourism and the Intramuros administration until May 31. Under the initiative, OFWs and their families may enter Fort Santiago and the Centro de Turismo Intramuros free of charge upon presentation of valid identification, with each worker allowed to bring up to 4 companions. Now, the DMW said the program aims to reconnect migrant workers with Philippine heritage while recognizing their contributions to the economy and national development. Officials added that more activities are being prepared for Migrant Workers Month in June, including a global migration summit.
Dateline Malacañang.
The Overseas Workers Welfare Administration or OWA is expanding long-term reintegration programs for returning overseas Filipino workers with a focus on entrepreneurship, livelihood support, and skills development. OWA Administrator Patricia Yvonne Caonan said the National Reintegration Network is being strengthened to help returning OFWs rebuild sustainable livelihoods in the Philippines. She said more than 10,000 OFWs and their dependents have already been repatriated from the Middle East amid regional tensions with ongoing return and evacuation efforts. The program brings together several agencies including the Department of Trade and Industry, Agriculture, Labor, Science and Technology, and TESDA to coordinate livelihood and enterprise support. Caonan added that financial assistance and training programs including low-interest loans and skills upgrading aim to help returning workers transition into local employment or business opportunities.
Dateline Malacañang.
The Department of Migrant Workers or DMW is intensifying monitoring of Filipino seafarers aboard vessels passing through the Strait of Hormuz amid rising tensions in the Middle East. The DMW said the move aims to ensure the safety and welfare of Filipino crew members navigating one of the world's busiest and most sensitive maritime corridors. As of May 25, the agency reported that 59 vessels carrying 1,834 Filipino seafarers have crossed the strait from April to May this year. The vessels include oil tankers, cargo ships, and container ships operating in the region. The DMW added that it is also tracking additional vessels that may soon pass through the area and continuous coordination with shipping firms and government agencies to ensure real-time monitoring and support.
Dateline Malacañang.
The Department of Social Welfare and Development or DSWD has extended initial assistance to the local government of Taguig City for families affected by a fire that hit Barangay Santa Ana. DSWD Assistant Secretary Irene Dumlao said the agency acted immediately upon the directive of Secretary Rex Gatchalian to ensure prompt aid for displaced residents. The agency has dispatched 700 family food packs and 700 ready-to-eat food boxes to support affected households currently staying in evacuation centers. Based on initial reports, around 684 families or more than 2,300 individuals were affected by the blaze which reached the fifth alarm. The DSWD said it is preparing additional relief items including sleeping kits and kitchen kits as it continues to coordinate with local authorities.
Dateline Malacañang.
The Department of Agriculture or DA reported an increase in compliance among retailers with the price cap on 5% broken imported rice in Metro Manila. The 50 pesos per kilo price ceiling was imposed under Executive Order 118 issued by President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. and took effect for 30 days starting May 13. The DA said compliance in the National Capital Region has risen to 63% as more retailers adjust to the mandated pricing. Authorities are conducting inspections in coordination with the Department of Trade and Industry, the Philippine National Police, and local government units to ensure compliance. The agency also noted ongoing implementation of rice assistance programs, including subsidized rice for vulnerable sectors through Kadiwa outlets nationwide.
Dateline Malacañang.
The National Food Authority or NFA has intensified rice milling operations in Sorsogen to support local palay farmers under its emergency procurement program. NFA Administrator Larry Lacson said the initiative is expected to benefit around 1,100 farmers in central Mindanao by ensuring their harvests are bought and processed. He said the program also helps free up warehouse space while sustaining government procurement of palay during difficult market conditions. operations. The agency has tapped 15 rice millers to process more than 215,000 sacks of palay, with output contributing to the government's rice buffer stock. Agriculture Secretary Francisco Chu Laurel Jr. said the program helps ensure fair prices for farmers while strengthening national food security and supporting the government's rice subsidy initiatives.
Dateline Malacañang.
The Department of the Interior and Local Government, or DILG, has ordered all local government units, or LGUs, nationwide to speed up and simplify the approval process to renewable energy, or RE, projects in support of the Philippines' clean energy and energy security goals. Under Memorandum Circular 2026-032 issued on May 11, LGUs are now required to use a standardized resolution of no objection, or RONO, to be passed through local councils instead of the previous letter of no objection issued by local executives. The DLG said this change is meant to remove delays, reduce redundant requirements, and improve coordination between national agencies and LGUs. The new process limits applications to 3 steps: submission of requirements, issuance of an order of payment, and payment plus RONO release. LGUs are also required to act on complete applications within 45 working days and must provide written reasons and remedies if an application is denied. The directive aligns with the push of President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. following Executive Order Number 110, which declared a national energy emergency and reinforced efforts to accelerate renewable energy development, including solar, wind, hydro, geothermal, and biomass projects.
Dateline Malacañang.
And that concludes today's edition of Dateline Malacañang. For Radyo Pilipinas World Service, I am Win Peñano. Good day.
From the Presidential Palace, Manila, Dateline Malacañang.